about 45% of all marriages will unfortunately end in a divorce or separation.
All right, Malia, welcome back. So good to see you today. How's everything been up in Idaho? Are you staying warm up there or still a little chilly?
Still a little bit chilly, but hoping to go to warm weather later on this month.
Good. So, Malia, you and I were talking offline a little bit about the subject and what we should talk about today. And we always want to be positive, right? We want to share positive things and just really good, great positive information. But sometimes people have to deal with things in their financial life that aren't always perfectly positive. So I just want to preface that, in a part of our conversation that we want to provide the best information that we can, even if you may be going through a tough transition in life. And so Malia and I were talking, and what she's been hearing lately is that people that are maybe going through relationship separations, possibly even divorce, are dealing with the challenge of what to do around their health insurance if this happens. And so, again, not the most gleeful subject, but it's a real subject, and personal finance is about real life. So let's jump in today and talk a little bit about what you're seeing there and what are some things people should be looking for if they're going through a transition like that where they may be losing their health insurance.
Yes, that is a great question. And unfortunately, this does happen. And according to the CDC and the Census Bureau, about 45% of all marriages will unfortunately end in a divorce or separation. And so I do see it come through often. And one of the biggest questions is, what should I be looking for? What should I know about health coverage while going through a divorce? Because it's something that is overlooked often and people don't think about, and they don't like to talk about divorce. But it is something that you need to know while you're going through negotiations.
Yeah, if you're going through something like this, obviously it's very stressful, it's very traumatic, and there's a lot of things to deal with. And if you're somebody who may not be carrying the financial burden in a sense, as far as dealing with the finances or having that full-time job, and now you're gonna have to go on your own, there's probably a lot you need to know. So if you were to start at the top, where would you start with even answering this question or having this discussion?
Yes, so definitely I recommend getting with a broker. Because there's so many different avenues that you can go to getting coverage. If you're the one that's losing coverage, just know that while you're going through negotiations, then you can stay on your spouse's coverage. However, when the divorce is finalized, you are going to have to get your own coverage. For the most part, most states, that's the way it is, but you definitely want to consult with your attorney regarding that. So get with a broker that can discuss all the different options that you have. And once you finalize divorce, you only have 60 days to get onto the new coverage. So you want to have that game plan ahead of time, and you want to know what it's going to cost ahead of time and what your coverage is going to look like, so that you can use that as part of your negotiations.
Great. So I think that's a really good point. By understanding what it's going to cost, that should be considered as part of whatever separation package that may be happening. What are some of the mistakes or things that outside of speaking to a broker ahead of time? What are some of the mistakes people are making, and then they come to you and now they expect Malia to just clean it all up?
Yeah, so waiting to the last minute. You don't want to wait till the last minute, because sometimes you have to make sure that all your prescriptions are covered and all your doctors are in network. And then also waiting till the last minute kind of limits your options, because it kind of puts you in a tight spot to choose something really quickly, because there's so many different options. You might want to do Cobra, you might be eligible for Medicaid, you might be able to get coverage through your current employer, but you won't know which one's the right option unless you start gathering all that information right away, which takes a lot of time. So I would say that's your biggest don't wait till the last minute. And I've had people do that. Like last month, I had someone wait till a week before everything was finalized and say, okay, what's my options? So it can be very stressful, and then you end up making the wrong decision.
So the options for people, if they are going to make this transition, you mentioned Cobra potentially being an option. How would that work if that spouse maybe is not working, or like how would they qualify for Cobra if they're getting divorced?
Right. So if you were married to someone who was employed by a larger company, then you'd be eligible for Cobra and you'd have 60 days to enroll. But Cobra is usually your most expensive option. And so you would only do Cobra if you didn't qualify for a subsidy through the marketplace or none of the other coverages look good for you. Sometimes people choose to stay on Cobra because there isn't any good options as far as their doctors won't take any marketplace plans or everything else, or they have some major health issues and they have to stay on that plan. So yeah, Cobra is one, and then Marketplace is more affordable than most people think. More people are qualified for a subsidy today than ever. So that's definitely one that you would want to look at. Also Medicaid. So say you have a stay-at-home spouse and they don't make any income and now they're losing coverage, Medicaid might be an option because now they qualify. It depends on your state, because if your state expanded Medicaid, then the rules and qualifications are going to be different than if it's a state that didn't expand Medicaid. So you have also alternatives too, but be careful with the alternatives because they sometimes will have pre-existing conditions clauses and things that you may not know about. So that's why it's important to work with a broker that will do the right thing for you. Because to be honest with you, some of the options that you have, the broker isn't going to get paid to help you determine that. But if the broker wants to do the best thing for you, they're going to say, okay, let's help you apply for Medicaid because that's your best option.
What are your thoughts on the health share plans these days? Because those can be a lot lower cost, but I've personally gone through an experience where it was fine. And then we were getting ready to switch to another plan, but I had some doctor bills that they had never covered before. And then that went bankrupt. And so I had to pay those off myself after. But I've also heard plans that have been in existence for 30 years and they've been just fine and never had any problems. So what is your perception on those options these days?
I am so glad you asked me that because I do get asked this probably on a weekly basis. So the health shares plan used to be a really good option, and I didn't have any issues with that with some of my previous clients in the past. However, when the American Rescue Plan Act went into play, when COVID hit, what ended up happening was a lot more people now are qualified for a subsidy because the income limits are so much higher now. And so what ended up happening is people ended up shifting and enrolling on marketplace plans. And so how health shares work is it's like a pool. People are pooling their money together to pay for each other's bills. When you have a smaller pool, it becomes less stable. So I did end up seeing several health shares that have been in the business for a while go out of business. And therefore, if it's a health share, you don't have a leg to stand on. If they don't pay your bills, you can't take them to court. So definitely now I wouldn't recommend it, but you know, things change. So you never know if the shift, people lose their subsidies, there could be a shift to go back to those as well.
So what else around this subject of dealing with a separation or divorce should people know? When it comes to kids, is there a difference if they have kids or not? Any other things like that we should be thinking about?
Yeah, so the kids could still stay. Let's just say you have your kids covered on a family plan. The kids can still stay on that plan because they're still a family member. But now after the divorce, you're no longer a family member. And that's why you would have to get coverage, but not necessarily the kids. But of course, that's all a part of negotiation, who has to cover the kids. So definitely seek out the advice of your attorney for that. I also want to talk about if it was the other way around, like let's just say you were the spouse that is providing coverage for, you know, your other half, and then now you're getting a divorce, you definitely want to make sure that once the divorce is finalized, that you cancel coverage for them. So you definitely need to notify the insurance company and let them know that they are no longer a family member. So sometimes, you know, everything's set through your premiums are paid through your employer, so you don't even notice that it's coming out of your paycheck. And so it does get overlooked, and that's why it's important to make sure that that's something that you take care of.
One tip you may want to consider if you're somebody who has to start paying for your own health insurance, if you have funds from an HSA available, that could be used potentially towards that to cover some health costs in the meantime. So if it comes down to a negotiation, that might be something you want to think about and include in there, because that might be only in the spouse's name and may not be a priority if you don't know about that, for example. So, but other than that, any last thoughts before we wrap up for today?
One thing I do want to mention is if you are offered COBRA, then you do have 60 days to decide, and it can be backdated too. So let's just say you're offered COBRA, like it's February, right? And your coverage ends this month, and then you have 60 days to make a decision, but you, for some reason, didn't secure your coverage. Something happens March 1st, you can activate COBRA and have it backdated.
Okay. So if you had a bill in between, you had a medical situation in between, you can backdate it and still be covered at that point.
Yes, a major incident.
Okay, good to know. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your knowledge. I know this is not the most positive topic, but we deal with humans, and this is real life, and we want to make sure that we're providing the best information we can. And if that's what you're seeing in your world, then I want to make sure we're bringing that to share with everybody, so that there's probably somebody out there that can really use this. So thank you so much again for your time and your knowledge, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
Thank you, Jason.